Beware of spoilers, and please subscribe to my channel if you like this video. Okay, I have to be honest, I can't really determine if the end of this episode could be considered as Deus Ex Machina. On one hand, it does feel like the solution came out of nowhere, and that it was just a setup to have Loki move freely in the last episode so he could save every possible timeline. However, his time slipping, which was first presented as a problem, was a crucial part of the first episodes of this season, and it involved elements that would later define the whole arc of this season, like Ouroboros and the temporal loom. So what I think really happened was that the writers had a first draft of the script, and they used the time slipping at the end of the season, and they needed to justify it and sort of explain its rules so it wouldn't feel like a Deus Ex Machina so blatantly. Which is fine, this is how writing goes many times, and the time slipping at the beginning of the season was really well executed. It even had some poetic images going on that I found really fascinating. But let's make a quick recap before I keep on going with my review. This episode starts right at the end of the previous one, when the temporal loom was overloaded with all the new timelines, which caused its explosion. Apparently, this caused the TVA to be emptied and only Loki remained there. However, the interesting thing is that time seems to be breaking down inside the TVA, which causes Loki to start time slipping again. And then the whole TVA becomes spaghetti, just like it happened to Victor Timely. Then Loki time slips to a branch timeline in 1962, San Francisco, where he sees Casey trying to escape from Alcatraz. Loki tries to speak with him, but Casey refuses, as he is unable to remember Loki. And then he time slips to where B-15 is, and then where Mobius is, and then where Obi is. And I think that out of all the characters that were in this episode, Obi was the one that was the most interesting to me, because he seemed like a full-fledged character filled with flaws, like when we see him trying to get his book into the bookstore. And he's also pivotal in creating a new tempad thanks to Loki giving him the TVA handbook. And that would allow Loki to gather all of his friends to read their collective temporal aura. So Loki can use this as a series of coordinates that could help him visit a point in time before the time loom explosion in the TVA. However, the plan got a tiny bit more difficult because Sylvie didn't want to help Loki save the TVA. After a brief conversation, Loki starts to see that the reason why he's so invested in saving the TVA is because he wants his friends to remember him and he wants them back. And when the plan seems to have completely failed because Sylvie didn't want to help them, the time branch where she's living starts to become spaghetti, giving her just a few seconds to escape through a time door. Then Sylvie goes to meet all the other teammates so they can read their collective temporal aura. But that isn't possible because the tempad created by OB disappeared. At first, Loki thinks that Casey, given his criminal background in his timeline, has stolen it. But they quickly realize that this isn't the case because Casey starts to disintegrate. And then Loki has to watch every one of his friends turn to spaghetti, even Sylvie. At this exact moment, because of his grief, Loki was able to control his time slipping to go back in time just a few minutes. And then he realized that the only motivation he needed to make sense of his time slipping was all the people that he considered his friends. In other words, it was about the who. I think this episode is kind of difficult to evaluate. On the one hand, there were several creative moments that were interesting, smart, and quite funny. But on the other hand, there were instances where I thought that some things were not properly explained or not even justified. For example, I didn't really understand why Sylvie remembered Loki, considering that no one else on the team was able to remember him. Also, why did everyone get sent to a timeline while Loki remained in the TVA? Was it because his timeline got pruned? I'm not so sure because that was also the case for Sylvie's original timeline. And I don't know if just being in another timeline for a while would be enough to create a strong bond between an individual and their adoptive time branch. However, at the same time, this episode was really spot on with a depiction of everyone's lives in their respective time branches. And about my title, I say that this episode was more sad than Avengers Infinity War because during that movie, you saw the people that were fighting Thanos disintegrating. And even though we later saw other people starting to disappear, the focus was on our heroes, which was obviously impactful. But the thing that hit me differently during this episode was that most of the characters didn't know what was going on. And you feel especially sad because of Mobius, who had two sons in his time branch, and he pointed that out repeatedly before agreeing to go with Loki. Also, do you think that this controlled time slipping was the power that He Who Remains had? Because Sylvie and Loki couldn't hit him at first. If that's the case, maybe this could mean that Loki could be as powerful as He Who Remains, and probably our best chance against the Council of Kangs. but who knows. So I really like this episode, but it had some confusing elements that I can't fully ignore unless they get explained in the next one. For now, I'm giving this episode an 8.5 out of 10. But what do you think? Do you give it a higher or lower score? Comment below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and for now, I'm out.